Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Russia and Ukraine have agreed to pause attacks on energy infrastructure for 30 days. President Vladimir Putin agreed to the deal during a phone call with US President Donald Trump. However, the Russian premier rejected an immediate and full ceasefire. Ukrainians President Zelensky also agreed to the truce deal on energy infrastructure following the call with Donald Trump. He called the call positive. However, both nations have stepped up aerial attacks. This comes as President Trump continues to reiterate his desire to bring an end to the conflict with the United States as a mediator. Russia and the US are set to meet in Saudi Arabia next week to discuss a possible ceasefire settlement. Let's get you a special interview now. There can't be peace talks in Europe without involving the European Union. That's the word coming in from James Lawless, Ireland's education minister. In an exclusive conversation with Jude Sannett, the minister said that the peace process in Europe can't just be left to Russia and the United States. Listen in.
I think that there have been some encouraging noises in the last couple of weeks. I do think that, again, we have to respect sovereignty and territorial integrity. And part of the international rules-based order that we support through the European Union and through the United Nations, which has given the world relative peace for the last 50, 60 years, has been obviously broken in Russia. We think the invasion was completely illegal. Previously, Russia had seized Crimea as well, so that was kind of a taste of what was to come. Right. And it's positive that there are now talks towards a ceasefire. I know Ukraine gave a sort of offer that maybe they would stop sea and air hostilities. I don't think Russia's fully taken that up just yet, but maybe because I've been travelling, I may be behind. It's moving every day. I know that Trump and Putin are talking as well, but one thing I would say, just a note of concern on that, Zelensky has said nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. I think is very fair. I think it's very reasonable, of course. And I would also say nothing about Europe without Europe, because ultimately Ukraine is part of the European landmass. That's true. And we cannot have a situation where there's a peace deal by two superpowers in Russia and the United States, and the entire European continent is out off the table. So because there is a worry about Eastern European states along the border of Finland, Poland, Estonia,
so
all the way down.
Has to be a participant in these talks.
Yes, because otherwise they're saying, well, who's going to decide our fate? So the European Union is itself a superpower, and you know, I think that we need to be involved in those talks as well.
All right. But by and large, and in conclusion, do you feel that are we closer to peace than before as far as Europe is concerned, or do you feel this could be smoke and mirrors right now?
I actually think we are a little bit closer. I think that's for a couple of reasons. I think that the recent moves to engage talks and have maybe two-way, three-way talks, you know, are progressing. There's been a couple of, I think it was very unfortunate what happened to Zelensky in the White House. I think it was no way to treat her as someone who's supposed to be an ally, but I think that that position has evolved again since, and that there has been engagement between Trump and Zelensky again. So it's positive that they're speaking again and maybe moving things on a little bit. I think also there's fatigue on both sides. I think that nobody wants to be at war. And I think that probably Ukraine has held out for a long time, actually with a smaller force very well. Russia was the aggressor. Russia attacked and launched the assault, but they had to be tiring as well. You know, my reports that I hear tell me that people in Russia are getting very tired, and that the war is taking a toll on the economy and internally on people's morale as well. So look, that's understandable. Nobody wants to be at war. So yes, I think we are. I think that it shouldn't have taken this long, but I think we are getting closer to a peace. But I think that a long-term peace that respects territorial integrity, sovereignty, and complies with that international rules-based order is critical.
All right, that was Ireland's minister saying they are closer to peace than earlier when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war. To take this forward, we're now joined by Ambassador Deepak Vohra, former Indian ambassador to Poland, and Bohdan Nahaylo, chief editor at Kyiv Post. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Ambassador Vohra, let me quickly ask you, do you think this truce when it comes to energy infrastructure between Russia and Ukraine is a positive step forward?
Thank you very much. I've just arrived at Bengaluru airport, so the video might be a bit patchy, but nevertheless, yes, it is a step forward, because the three things we've always talked about in this conflict: one is energy, second is fuel, third is fertilizer. The African nations, as you know, have suffered gravely. Excuse me, and they will welcome this. As far as energy is concerned, Russia is one of the largest suppliers of oil and gas, and if Ukraine continues to hit their refineries and so on, and the Ukrainians are using Western supplied missiles. All this is nonsense that these are manufactured in Ukraine because they don't have the capacity. Their armaments industry is zero at the moment. The Russians have obliterated everything. So certainly, if the energy deal goes through, it'll be better for the whole world, particularly for the developing world. So, I mean, let me put it to you like this, sir. You give me 30 seconds more. There is this group, there is this couple at the dining table, America and Russia. The menu is Ukraine. The Europeans are waiting outside for whatever crumbs they can find on the place after the two main diners have left. The rest of the world is praying and hoping that something will emerge.
That's an important point. Stay with us, Ambassador Vohra. Let me get in Bohdan Nahaylo, the chief editor of the Kyiv Post as well. Mr. Nahaylo, what are your hopes for talks in Saudi Arabia next week? They will be very crucial after the present round of talks between Putin and President Trump and Zelensky.
Let's get down to basics and talk about realities. There's no ceasefire in the air, and there has been no ceasefire about hitting energy infrastructure. The Russians haven't followed up with it. They hit the very day that Trump and Putin had their discussion, the Russians hit Ukrainian infrastructure, and they've stepped up their attacks. There was a very heavy attack this night on Odessa, the very port that your esteemed ambassador says is so vital to the third world. The Russians are hitting it. They're destroying the grain corridor. And with all due respect, it's not simply, the Europeans are watching this feast of Russia and America. India is behaving like a scavenger. It is waiting for the pieces to drop from the table. It is buying arms from Russia, a war aggressor and war criminal. It is buying oil. You're not a neutral party. And stop pretending that this is just about the West and about Europe and about America. I remember being on Indian television 2 or 3 years ago, and then it was Washington was to blame for everything. Funnily enough, Washington is trying to stop the war, and it's Russia that is saying, no way, we want more territory, we want conditions on our terms, not Ukraine's terms. There's no respect for Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, territorial integrity. It's all about give us what we want. So far, Trump has used carrot and stick. He's given the carrot to Russia, the stick to Ukraine, and used sort of 19th century colonial tactics about forcing Ukraine into making a deal that is good for him. Ukraine's not going to buy this.
Mr. Nahaylo,
would India, if you had a war with Pakistan and China was telling you that we're dealing with Pakistan and India, please, behave yourself and do as we tell you, and we'll take a chunk of India also as part of the deal. Would you go along with that? You'd say, get lost.
Mr. Nahaylo, India and the Prime Minister have been saying that this war must come to an end and diplomacy is the only way forward. So that has happened at multiple occasions, and Prime Minister has met Zelensky and conveyed that as well. What I would also like to ask you,
Mr. Parikshit, let me remind you that when Hitler invaded Europe, America didn't say to Churchill, give up, you don't have a chance against Hitler, you're losing so many people, just give Germany what they need. And this is what Russia wants right now. Putin is acting as a Hitler. He has taken a chunk of Ukraine, he's killing our people, and we are supposed to say diplomacy. What diplomacy? There's no Russian diplomacy, it's brute force.
All right, I respect your sentiments and I know your emotions as well, Mr. Nahaylo. I'm going to come back to you. Let me also get in our guest from Russia who's joining us right now. Sergey, what is your view on the current situation? Strong words there from Bohdan Nahaylo on the situation, saying that Russia has been bombing targets, attacking targets in Ukraine. And there is no commitment to a ceasefire or bringing the war to an end. Russia wants to end the war on its own terms. How would you respond to that, Sergey?
Namaste. Thank you so much for inviting me into this panel discussion. First of all, I want to tell that the war is always a challenge for all humanity. We can see that after the special military operation, our nation, Russian nation, become more dedicated to our historical mission. Because what is the main quality of the nation? is not only land, history, language. The most powerful quality of the nation is unity. Unity. And right now we have unity. We have some spiritual mood to be together to complete our mission, which is a justice, which is a we can tell that like our historical mission to unite all nations to serve to God. That's why I can see opposite. Right now is Ukraine bombed our military aerodrome, as you know, this night. And to Mr. Zelensky, who is not president anymore, he was not re-elected, he lost all his legacy, is only one chance to be survived. It's to continue war and make this conflict more deep. That's why after Donald Trump conversation, after his meeting with Donald Trump in the White House, he immediately jumped to European politicians and asked them, give us weapons, please give us support. That's why I can see this situation completely different way. Donald Trump break down stereotypes. He's like Mahatma Gandhi and John Kennedy of the modern age. He's peacemaker. About our national leader, everybody understands that he started a big job to bring justice in international relationships. That is my vision of situation, current situation.
All right. Bohdan Nahaylo, would you like to respond to what Sergey just said, our Russian guest said, as far as the war is concerned?
Yes, I would. Total rubbish. Justice. They have broken every international agreement. They've broken the Charter of the UN. They've invaded a neighboring state whose security and territorial integrity they guaranteed when Ukraine gave up its inherited nuclear weapons. Let's not forget about that. And this unity that they talk about, the spiritual mission of Russia, imperialism, Russian imperialism, whether under the Tsars, under the communists, Moscow dominates. You're not talking about a nation. You're talking about a Russian empire that is sending your native peoples to the front. You are not killing Russians from Moscow and St. Petersburg, the whites as you see them. You are using your ethnic minorities, your Yakuts and Bashkirs, to fight your wars, your dirty wars for you. So look, you are war criminals. You have broken every rule in the game. And you rightly said, we bombed a military airdrome. You bombed cities tonight. You bombed the center of Odessa,
right,
a city that you regarded as a Russian city until now. You're killing Russian speakers, ethnic Russians. You, Russians, are killing them. And the world needs to know that. And in particular in India, which has been traditionally a fence sitter, it needs to wake up and see Russia not as a great friend in BRICS, but as a war criminal that exploits the situation to expand its empire.
Okay, Bohdan Nahaylo, we respect your sentiments, but for a long time, for the last 4 years, you had an administration in the US which was completely supporting, and I'm just speaking in terms of ground realities right now, geopolitical realities.
It didn't give us the weapons we wanted, long-range weapons to hit Moscow.
But Biden was fully committed.
Kyiv. They are hitting Kyiv and Odessa.
The Biden administration was fully committed. You have Donald Trump now.
Washington didn't want Russia
Donald
to
Trump
lose.
now views the situation very, very differently. All right, I'll just get an Ambassador Vohra as well.
America supported us half-heartedly. So did Europe. And only now is Europe waking up, thank God, as Americans are playing footsie with
But Americans are also telling Europe that you are responsible for your own security.
The Trump administration, and we know that they have dirt on Trump from his stay, from his business dealings in Moscow, what he did in hotels in Moscow.
Ambassador Vohra.
We know where it's coming from.
Okay, let me get an Ambassador Vohra as well. Ambassador Vohra, I'd just like to ask you about the current ground realities. And in the current situation, Russia, of course, is hoping to get a deal in their favor. Ukraine completely against right now. Who do you think has more bargaining chips on the table? And how would you respond to Bohdan Nahaylo as well and Sergey?
Well, thank you very much to our colleague from Ukraine. I'd like to say that learn some diplomatic language. Calling India a scavenger only reflects your lack of culture and upbringing, sir. In diplomacy, we don't use such terms. So I would urge you, you are losing friends faster than you can say Donald Trump. You did the same with Hungary, you did the same with Slovakia, etc. Please learn, sir. Learn how to be polite in your conversation. You get verbally aggressive when you're losing on the battlefield. I've seen this in 53 years in diplomacy. I can use strong language against you too, sir, but we're not trained to do it. So what does President Trump want? What does President Putin want? President Putin says that whatever I have, I want to keep that. It's peace on as is, where is basis. As far as President Trump is concerned, he would like to seal his reputation. I've met him several times. I've served in the United States. And by the way, sir, I've served as ambassador in 4 countries in the post-Soviet space. So I understand. I've been to beautiful Ukraine several times. May I just say that President Trump would like, of course, to go down in history as the person who found the solution to this war. Ukraine has suffered. At the end of the day, they have been excluded from the peace process. They can scream and shout and abuse all they want. The reality is Europe is waking up now. Europe does not have the strength to take on the Russian Federation. So the reality is, my prime minister went to Ukraine. He went to Moscow. He spoke to both leaders. He said, this is the time for peace, for diplomacy, not a time for war. Whatever happened subsequently, you know as well as I do. What I see happening in the next 2 weeks, is that some kind of an agreement will be reached on food, fuel, fertilizer, on energy, and I believe that both sides will claim victory. That means President Putin of Russia, who's winning on the ground. And sir, the winner does not offer a deal. In a boxing ring, if our friend from Kiev has ever seen it, the chap who's clobbering the other fellow doesn't say, all right, let's declare the draw. No, it's the loser who gets abusive and aggressive and then wants a deal. The winner does not, sir. But the fact that President Putin is offering a deal, sir, that itself suggests that there is an element of seriousness. Whether you accept it or not, this is our assessment.
All right. Okay, we've completely run out of time, but I'd really like to thank all our guests for joining us. Very strong views on all sides, and I respect all views on the table. All views have been respected, sir.
Asking Britain for a deal when it was a colony, when you were suppressed, you wanted freedom. Freedom for you is very important. It is for Ukraine.
Would you ask this man to lay off? He doesn't know what he's talking about.
All right, Ambassador Vohra, we'll have to leave it there. I respect all views and very strong sentiments on all sides, but we'll have to leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much for joining us on Global Eye. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.